Hey there, a quick warning to please take care while listening to this episode as there are references to suicidal ideation. Thanks and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to Shades and Layers. I'm your host, Kutwanuskwasana Richie, and my guest today is Shalita Grant, Tony Award nominated actress, NCIS New Orleans alumna, and founder of the haircare brand For Naturals Hair. Today, we mainly talk about her journey to founding the plant-based treatment formula, but our candid discussion also spans her acting life and her courageous exit from the popular TV franchise, where she had become a series regular. A quick background to that exit is that she left because of her struggles with traction alopecia, which was witnessed by the millions of viewers of the show. Shalita was determined to find a solution though. So in 2019, she set to work in her dining room in California and developed a formula that would address her own complex type 4 hair issues. In doing that, she has empowered her clients, or her girlfriends as she calls them, to experience newfound freedom and confidence with their kinky hair, whether on vacation or in their daily lives. Her commitment to healing and uplifting Black women has also driven her to develop a patent-pending textured hair detangling technique. Okay, it's time to get into this story. Here's my geeky, informative, and fun as hell conversation with Shalita Grant. How do you describe your work? And what is the deeper meaning you attach to it?
I describe my work now as making Black women's lives easier, introducing ease. And the deeper meaning of the work for me is about healing. It's about generational healing, self-healing, and also like healing in the marketplace for a segment of the hair population whose needs are not being met.
Yeah. So what triggered this healing journey for you, both in the marketplace and, personally?
So I like to define healing very simply as having a different experience. So if you had an abusive relationship, the different experience is a love relationship, right? Like a completely different experience. So for me, what that looked like was, since I'm a kid, I've learned and known about Black hair. And not just because of the hair on my head, but my grandma's owned a hair salon since before I was born. And my mother has been a hairstylist. My aunts have all been hairstylists and one still is. So I grew up in the hair salon. Right. And I knew I considered my grandmother like a great Black business owner in that she was a learner. She would go to these trade shows, the Bronner Brothers convention, every year or every other year. Yeah, like she was really committed to learning and staying up to date. But, as I've gotten older, what I understand about hair for Black women is that it's not really about care. It's about hiding it, styling it, frying it, laying it to the side, because
managing it,
but like putting it into something that makes it manageable, and that manageability looks like you not having to touch it, right? Like braids, like, putting it away. So for me, that followed me. So I am a Black woman with typical Black hair, type 4 hair. That's the hair chart that describes the pattern of the hair, right? So super, super textured. But I have this atypical career that requires the use of my hair. So I'm an actress. And so my hair changes with the job.
Right.
And so my experience in the world as a Black woman with this hair and the professional, salon space, it mirrored my experience on Hollywood sets. So that lack of care, and for some people, like they touch our hair with this like mixture of like disgust and apprehension.
Right.
That never leaves. Right. So I learned that like, no matter what level you're on, no matter how much money you're making, you have the same experience. And that experience is a lack of options, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did a show, NCIS New Orleans, which you mentioned, and that was my first series regular role. So how did that job differ from my previous TV jobs? Well, my previous TV jobs were recurring roles. So that means that I had more than one episode, right? But when you're a series regular, you're in all or most of the episodes, and you have like a dedicated hair person and makeup person, and your hours and the expectation of like working, it's way higher, right?
Yes.
So I assumed that with the new job and the new like standards, I guess, would come with better care, right? Like I was more forgiving of those like recurring jobs because it's like, it's basically like a 1 or 2 off, right? So it's like, oh, she's going to do my hair. It doesn't matter. I just need to make sure that for this project, I leave this job with the hair on my head.
Correct.
And that it looks okay on camera.
Yeah.
But with that series regular job, I had the assumption that, I'm here for the long haul. So they're going to make choices that make it easier for me to do that. And that wasn't the case.
No. Yeah.
So I experienced on that show, I have this mandate of like showing up on camera, and they wanted me in a ponytail. Then I have this really fragile hair that every time they flat ironed or, did something different to, I experienced different damage. So season 2 was my first full season, and I went into extensions. And as a result of those extensions and an episode that was my starring episode, but they wrote an episode where the Black girl goes underwater.
No.
No. Yes.
Stop, please. I'm having nightmares just thinking about it.
In retrospect, it seems like total sabotage, right? And it required me to be in water for like 2 weeks, chlorinated water. We shot in chlorinated water, took those extensions down, and I had traction alopecia in the center of my head.
Yeah. Ow.
Season 3, I went back into the wigs because, I realized from the months of being in extensions that they didn't build like a care plan, like a hair care plan. The care plan was the actress cares for her hair on the weekend, and we'll pay every few months for her to get these new extensions in. So I thought I'll just go into the wig. By the middle of season 3, the hair around my hairline had come down to just my nose, but the hair underneath the wig was like longer. By my hiatus, my hairline was down to like 1.5 inches.
No.
And our hiatuses were pretty short, like less than 3 months, like 2.5 months. And
oh my gosh, what a nightmare.
There was no, like, when I saw that damage, I was actually in a hair salon getting my hair colored. And it was in that appointment that I realized that I had to quit my job. I had to quit this 6-figure job because I'm going back to work with less hair than I had before. And so there's really it's been like this for years. Like, I don't know how we're going to hide the lack of hair that I have.
Right.
So I came back in season 4 in probably the ugliest wig in television history, certainly in that franchise's history. And I got it. I mean, I really like the fans. Every week the show was on. And by that point, I wasn't even watching the show. But every week I would get tons of notifications like, what the shoe polish? What is going on with her hair? Like, come on.
That must be horrible for your self-confidence and just your image,
Yeah, it was. It was one of the most challenging times in my adult life. I didn't have like some great childhood. My parents were kids. They were 18 and 17. My mom went to jail when I was 5 years old.
Oh, Lord.
I had a lot of instability. So for me as an adult, it was all about like, I have to take the best care of myself and make sure that I'm in like situations that don't like scar me. And so I was in a situation that was scarring. And so
For
it was
sure.
like, all right, you either quit, you quit life, or you figure out how to go through this. Right. So all through that time, I was in therapy, and I was like an A+ therapist student, like whatever.
You did all the homework.
Yeah, when she would like refer to some like psychologist's like work or whatever, I would buy the book and I would read it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, she would, Thich Nhat Hanh has this meditation. Okay, that's my meditation now. So I found like the 4 agreements, and it was all about like, I looked at this situation as like, look, this is like high school with money. and so like, this is like not a great situation, but you've actually been in worse, right? Like as a kid, you have way fewer choices, and now you're an adult facing a really tough situation. This is an opportunity to grow. This is an opportunity to become even stronger. And so for me, it was, you know, those long hours on sets and being disrespected and, you know, whatever. It was like, all right, do you become this, or do you rise above this? Do you, you know, grow through this? And I just chose to grow through it. And so I had the choice. When I saw that I was going bald in the front of my hair, it was like, great, now you got to quit. And for some people, that's really scary. But for me, it was like, how do you make this choice the most comfortable for you? So it was about learning about finances and learning to live below your means, you know, like bringing my bills down. So I'm not really worried about, you know, the next job. And the next job came like 3.5 months after I left that show. That was one of my biggest fears, was publicly quitting a job would mean that I would never work in my industry again.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that didn't come true. I worked 2 shows in the same year that I quit that show. And so when I got into that next year in 2019, I thought, okay, all right, old girl, that didn't happen. But both of those characters were still in wigs. So if and when you get another series regular job, you're probably going to run into the same experience, because the truth of your hair is it's so fragile. And so you are going to have to figure out how to solve this problem for yourself of your fragile hair and your career that doesn't care about the health of your hair. They just care about getting you on that camera. And so how do you solve this problem? This generation's old problem. This problem,
right? I mean, you'd think it would be figured out by now, but
exactly in 2023, right? You know, in the year of our curl creams and curl custards.
That's the thing, exactly, because you know we've had this natural hair movement for more than a decade. It's been like decades since the 70s.
Since the 70s, yes. Yeah. So like, what is happening? Why hasn't this been solved? So when I unpacked sort of the why, right? It's that we have this very raced lens on this hair type. And that lens says that because this hair is so different from type 1 hair, from straight hair, then we have to create something man-made chemical that will like beat that hair into submission. And so for me, the healing thought was, I am a human being. And so there is something on this earth that is natural that will solve my human problems, because these are human problems. Because I'm a human. Yes, I'm not an alien.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I looked to like non-white hair cultures to see how do they approach hair and hair problems, and what are they using to solve them. And so I looked at India, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Greece. And it was from India that I learned about Ayurveda. And very simply, Ayurveda is a style of medicine that looks at all of the human maladies and says, hey, there are practices and natural plants, like plants, that solve these human problems. And they don't just solve the symptoms, they solve it at the root, right? We have to solve the root cause of these hair problems. And so they use henna and cassia and a bunch of other herbs. But why? Because henna naturally binds to the strand. So that binding to the strand does a couple of things. Number one, it solves porosity problems. What's porosity? Porosity is simply the health of the cuticle. The cuticle is that first layer of the hair. And so our cuticles really determine how our hair reacts to hair products and even water. So low porosity strands, the cuticle is made up of more fat, which is why water rolls before it absorbs. And high porosity strands, the cuticles are more water. So they're made up of more water, and there are holes in the scale structure. So the hair gets wet, but it gets dry really fast. And so that henna paves over the cuticle, introducing a water-soluble element to the low porosity hair and introducing a covering to that high porosity, the compromised strand. And so what that does is everything you want it to do. The hair reacts better to water. Hair products perform way better, and you have to use less of them. Also, the dryness and the moisture factor, that gets solved, which also solves that breakage and the slow growth. Like we have all these growth plateaus. Your growth plateau isn't a growth plateau. It's a retention issue. You're not retaining the most delicate, sensitive, weak part of your strand, the ends. So your hair is growing at 1/2 inch a month, but you're breaking it often at the same rate that it's growing. So you need an intervention for those strands. So I looked at all these cosmetic chemistry journals. And so cosmetic chemistry is different from cosmetology because cosmetic chemistry looks at the science of hair for hair products. The cosmetology schools teach how to style and use certain hair products, right? So that's why there's this lack of knowledge in our hair salons, in our professional spaces. So when I realized what the crux of the issue was, I went to all of these other sources to learn and then solve my Black actress problem in 2019.
You know, it's interesting. I saw one of the actors from the HBO series Insecure, and he was saying, well, I had to learn to be my own barber because I didn't have, you know, someone on set who could look after my hair. And I'm thinking, okay, this is like a very successful series and it's all Black.
Black-led.
Right? I mean, I find that really incredible. Like, wow, okay.
Well, I thought that was incredible too. My stylist on NCIS was a Black man, and his skill set was he was a barber. He put on a couple of wigs on men, but back decades before. So he was using all these outdated practices, blah, blah, blah. The problem is our cosmetology schools, they teach hair is hair. And they teach that lesson to everyone, including the Black people. So for Black licensed cosmetologists who want to work with textured hair, it's trial and error. It's them like, you know, just trying things out and seeing what works. And then they get a following because they helped a certain group of people. And that's that, right? But they're not really learning how to deal with this hair in any like licensed fashion, right?
Right.
So that's why.
Yeah, you have these problems. You're listening to Shades and Layers, and today we have Shalita Grant, Tony-nominated actress and founder of 4 Naturals Hair. Up next, you will hear about her many business achievements as well as other high-achieving accolades that she's received along the way. You'll hear how she got herself into the famous performing arts school, Julliard in New York, as in she personally as a teenager got herself into the school. And you'll also hear about how she set on a journey to finding freedom in her own body. And as a gateway to this healing process, she tried a bunch of different things like serious weightlifting and pole dancing. So tell me about, the journey of formulation, how that went about. And I know there's a patent pending for your formula. So if you can also touch on that, and how all of this came about.
Yeah. So 2019, I did all this research and then I started experimenting on myself. And I looked at like all of the Black women that I tried henna and it had gone wrong, and kind of codified like what everyone had basically in common. And then I created this formula that I thought, okay, this could do something.
Mm-hmm.
And my first treatment, I always call it like my Black girl paranoia, like my Black girl trust issues, because, we have the experience of like getting a hair product and it works at first time. And you're like, oh my gosh, I found my thing. And then
4 washes later,
3 uses later. Yes, it's a completely different reaction in your hair, and it's expensive, or it's a lot, and you feel bad throwing it out, so you just keep it, right?
Yeah.
And so I did my first treatment, and this is what I saw. When I rinsed out my deep conditioner, I saw my waves, right? Like we have these like peekaboo curls that happen, like if your hair ends in a fro. When you get it wet, you're like, dang, I wish my hair always looked these beautiful curls when it's like soaking, sopping wet, right? But then as soon as it dries, it shrinks up, stands right up, and gets really stiff, right? So I saw the peekaboo curls and my hair was dry. So that was the first thing, but I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is going to last.
We gotta see.
We'll see. Yeah. See what happens. By my third treatment, like a week after my third treatment, I had like walked past a mirror in my house and I was like, what? Because I knew that week I slept on my hair without a bonnet. Like I like committed a bunch of sins, right? A bunch of hair sins. I also like was working out, rolling around on the floor. Like my workouts back then, I went to a pole studio. So I like pole dance. So I'm like,
hang on a second. We're coming back to that.
Yes, we are coming back to that.
Okay.
Because after that week, I was like, whoa, I have genuine curls and they're moving. My hair is bone dry. This treatment is different. Like this hair today is so different from the 3 treatments I did before. So let's talk about pole. So why did I choose pole? So in my 20s, I lifted heavy. And that was like my thing, right? Like,
love it.
I'm tiny, but I'm really strong, And, there's only so much it is you could do before you're like, man, I am bored. This is boring. So I in my third, like I turned 30 and I was like, I want to like learn like a sport. Like I want to learn a thing, And so I went through a bunch of different ideas, and I was watching this like reality show, and the lady was like a pole dance studio owner. And so I was like, oh, wow. I remember doing like one of these classes when I was 18. Let me look at it. And I was like, whoa, this stuff is really cool. And so I was in there, but then I quickly realized, like in my personal history, I've never really felt comfortable in my own sensuality, right? Because when I was 17, got myself into Julliard, moved to Manhattan. I lived in New York for 7 years. And those first few years were really formative for me.
So casually got myself into Julliard. Okay. All right then. Got it.
I know. Hey man, if you could like dream it, it can happen.
Right.
So I was there, and I had like some really like tough like street harassment incidences very young. 17, 18. And so I changed really how I presented in public. Like if I was wearing something a little more like scantily clad, but I was like going to an event or something like that, I'm taking a cab. I'm wearing a long coat, and in general, I just dressed way more, and still do to this day, just like, loose, like, don't look at me, And so when I started doing these pole dancing classes, I'm doing this private thing in public. I took it as an opportunity to really get in touch with my sense of sensuality. Like, what is sensual to me? What do I love about me? And then inevitably, I would just look up at the top of my head and I'd be like, this damn wig, it's so hard. It's so hard. Like it became like this, it became this acute, like this area of my body still makes me uncomfortable, my hair. So then I went on this journey of like accepting my hair. And so I would go to these classes without a wig and, went through that. So by the time I did in 2019, and I started like experimenting with making a mask and making a treatment to solve my hair problems. After that third treatment, I did my first class with my newly treated hair. Ooh. And the level of freedom and sexiness, just sensualness that I felt, like going upside down and not having to be insecure about like my wig back showing, right? Like, and just being like, hey, no matter how much I sweat, no matter how much I roll on the floor, I'm going to look like this. And my hair is soft and it's glorious and it's mine. And it's there was this level of power that I felt, that you probably felt too when you shaved it off. Yeah, absolutely. That like, there is nothing that takes away from me because this is just it, right? Like I am in this state of stasis and this stasis is beautiful, right? Exactly. And that's how I felt with my treated hair. Right. There's no self-betrayal, the stuff standing up and shrinking on me. I think I look one way and my wig is showing, like that. Oh, friction. Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. I was frictionless. Yeah. Yeah. It comes with a sense of freedom when, you feel good about your whole being. That's there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So formulating. So when I got to that third treatment, I was like, all right, baby. There is this base treatment formula. This is it. Right. And so I found a formulator and I sent my treatment. I sent all my ingredients and everything. And her job was basically take my layman's formula and put it in a way that another cosmetic manufacturer will be able to replicate this. And so I'm talking to my manager and she sees my hair and she's like, hey, I know a lawyer. You should talk to him about your treatment because this is like, it's transformational. Right. So I meet with this Black man and I show him my before and after photos, right? Because I started, I incorporated my business and then I was like, okay, I just want to make sure that it works on everyone. So I did this product testing period for about 2.5, 3 months. And so these were all Black women that came from social media that lived in LA, and they agreed to do anywhere from 7 to 9 treatments with me for free in exchange for the photos and all of the information. Perfect. Yeah. So I showed him a few of these photos and he just burst out laughing. He burst out laughing. And I was so like, at first I was like, what the F? Because he was also bald, right? So it was like, oh, like I was about to go, oh. But he laughed because he was like, I have sisters and a mom, and this is what the Jerry curl used to look like. Like we used to put chemicals in our hair to look like this. And you're telling me you did this with plants? And I'm like, hello? Yes, I did. She always looks like this. Water, gel, leaving, whatever. Right. This is her hair now, right? And so he was like, you got to patent this. So I found a patent attorney in LA And, my patent on the formula is based on the fact that it's an emulsion. There are no henna emulsions. Everyone does the powders. They sell you the powder, but there's no emulsion that has all of the humectants that you need.
Right.
Because that was one of the things that I learned from the henna fails on this textured hair. They would often use a henna powder that was like a rapid dyeing, right?
Right.
So that was one. They would use henna and just the henna powder and water. That was two. And then some of them didn't deep condition out. So with those three things, as long as I stayed away from that, I was able to get a successful formula. So in the 4Naturals henna mud mask, I have the humectants that you need for low porosity hair.
Right.
Aloe vera, olive oil. In the cassia deep conditioner, there's rosemary oil. So there's like all of these different like humectants that make the introduction of the henna to the hair way more palatable to the cuticles, no matter if you're low porosity or high porosity. So now in 2023, when all of the relaxer manufacturers are being sued, the question is when that formula is discontinued, like when those products are discontinued, there's really nothing on the market for textured hair. Not that that was great for textured hair anyway.
Right. Yeah. We know all the problems, right? There's a reason there's a lawsuit. Yeah.
So the formulation process, it took a minute because, I ran into the pandemic. So they shut down,
there was that.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So it's really been a journey. And I do believe that the entrepreneurial journey is a spiritual journey.
Yes. Tell me more about that.
So, okay. For me, I come from children. I mentioned that. That's how I have learned to understand a lot of my childhood. And so my mother is a felon, a convicted felon. And so when she got out of jail, for her, the options were super limited. So she started working under my grandma. And then, my mom has had 50 different careers. And they were all of the get rich quick variety. Right.
Yeah.
So as a child, watching this adult make horrible financial decisions, I suffered. We moved every year, sometimes twice a year. I went to 6 different elementary schools. There was a lot of flux in my childhood. And as a kid, you're trying to figure out why is my grandma got a house and my mom doesn't, right? My grandma has 7 kids. She's been married 5 times, whatever. But
lady.
I know. On my mom's side of the family, there's just the generational curse, if you will, is just having kids super young. So my great great grandmother died when I was 9 years old. My great grandmother died in 2018.
What?
So yeah.
Wow.
So
they had to be very young then.
Very young. So, my great grandmother started having kids when she was 13.
Wow.
My grandmother had my mother when she was 15 turning 16. My mother had me when she was 18. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was all right, you can't have kids young, because even though my grandmother is now established, right, it was really hard, for my mother when she was a kid, right?
Right.
So for looking at my mom, it was you have to have one job. My grandma's had this one business. My mother has 50. So that's why we're so broke. That's why there's so much instability. So when I was in school, it was all right, I need to finish school and then I need to get higher education, but it needs to be in one thing. And so I did that for myself in the most unstable industry ever.
Yes.
But I think I have a higher tolerance for that kind of thing. And so the hustle in me was really strong and I worked, right? And I was able to support myself. So when I got to 2019 and I saw this incredible treatment that I had created, there was a ton of fear. around going into business for myself.
Yeah.
Because my whole story was you can only do one thing. If you're going to be successful, you can't be a multi-hyphenate. So there was growth. Yeah, there was a lot of growth that I had to do in that area. And, it was constant, believing in myself. Like part of how I dealt with my imposter syndrome was, at first it was like, I know that this thought inside of me that's saying, who do you think you are?
Man.
That thought of like, you can't do this. Nobody in your family is successful doing this, right? Like my grandma provided service, right? Like she didn't have a product, right? So I knew that the end result of these thoughts are that I'm supposed to stop. Why? Because I already dealt with this in one area of my life with acting, right? So I was already acutely aware of how that worked. So I just thought, all right, I'm going to learn. Who do I think I am? Well, I think I'm an entrepreneur. Well, you don't know any successful. Okay, well, there are books. So I'm going to get some Audible books on successful entrepreneurs. And then after listening to one of them, I had the courage to stand up to that inner thought and move forward. Right. And so now my relationship to that, who do you think you are? You can't do that is, well, I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn how to do that because you're right. Yes, you are right. You are missing one word yet. Yes. So I will teach myself. I will be open to learning so that I can do that. And I can shut you up with my action. So, it was evolving from hiding for weeks, months, from tasks that I needed to do to progress my business, right?
I know.
There's an evolution, right? And so applying a lot of love and patience and then like interviewing the voice. And now that process is a lot shorter for me now. So it's like, oh, I get that, like that stabbing feeling. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, you just don't know a thing. Let me just pull up a YouTube video.
Sure. Perfect. So now you've got product out in the market, and how are you selling it at the moment, and who are those clients buying it?
So I'm selling direct to consumer, and I'm also, selling directly to salons right now because of the strike. So I've funded my business with the money from, my first life for this whole time. But then the strike happened, right? And so my mindset, from one of the hardest points in my adult life has always been like, what am I learning? What am I learning? And where is the opportunity? So now I'm fundraising. I am like getting all of my things together and like, having meetings with people and things. And so this is what I've learned from this process, which I wouldn't have known if I wasn't needing to explain my business to people. Is that about 30% of my business since 2022, when I started selling direct to consumer in February, is repeat purchases. So
good.
When people use the treatment, which there are about 3 treatments in every jar, they are having the same experience that I had in 2019, and they continue to use the product.
Perfect.
So who are my users? My users are Black women with type 4 hair. My users are people who are caring for children with textured type 4 hair. So it's been really awesome getting emails from people who are like, hey, I actually started using your treatment because you said it was good for the scalp, like it would, not harm my scalp. In fact, I have a scalp inflammation issue, and no matter what diet I go on, my scalp still is inflamed, and I used your treatment and it cooled my scalp and I got a good night's sleep.
Right.
And so the other thing that I love is that people are recognizing how much money they save. And that was one of the things that I learned too when I first started using the treatment. Not only do you use fewer products, like less of it in your hair, everything works. Like everything works like it says it will. And if it doesn't, you're not in the dark like, oh, what happened to my hair? You're like, oh no, this stuff just leaves a terrible residue. Like it's the product, not my hair. Right. And so they are also saving money because they're not having to buy wigs and extensions, and they're not, spending all of this money doing all this styling and stuff, because their hair is so much more manageable that they can do it at home.
Right.
So people are silk pressing and then treating and then enjoying their curls. Like it's just an easier life with your hair.
It gives you all the options that we like to have, but safer now because we do all sorts of things.
Beach. Yes, going to the beach. Like I had product testers, her first treatment, she was high porosity. So people with high porosity, the first thing that they notice is the perma curl definition. People with low porosity hair, it takes them treatment 3 for most low porosity to see those perma curls. But she went to Hawaii for her 52nd birthday, jumped in, told me she was swimming with the turtles, and she had curls. She was walking through Hawaii, putting flowers in her hair. Like first time in 52 years, enjoying her hair.
Yeah. Because you always have to plan around,
Exact. So that goes back to your first question.
Black girls, man.
It goes back to your first question. Like, how do you describe what you do? I make Black women's lives easier.
So it's a treatment. Can you combine it with other hair products?
Absolutely. So here is the difference between the 4 Naturals treatment and every styling product on the market. The styling products say, if you use my pattern, if you use my curl mix, if you use my whatever, you will see curls. The 4 Naturals treatment says, after you treat your hair, every product you use, you'll see curls.
Okay.
That's the difference.
Brilliant. Shalita Grant is the founder of the brand 4 Naturals Hair, and as you've heard, her journey to entrepreneurship was triggered by a very public struggle with traction alopecia, and now we find out how she's enjoying this entrepreneurial journey. We get into the shades and layers rapid fire and also hear about her vision for the brand in the future. Quickly before we get into the rapid fire, what have been the best things about being an entrepreneur? What are the 3 positives you can name?
The 3 positives, I guess the first one is growth. That's like my mindset, right? Because listen, I started from the bottom, you know what I'm saying? So my whole mindset, my whole life is like, it's only up from here, baby, But the amount of growth that I've done, like getting up every day and getting up for myself, for my business, that's been really powerful. Going from that, like the learned helplessness, like rooting that out of my spirit, that's been super powerful. The second part of this journey that I really love is really the feedback. And I count the feedback as repeat orders. Like yesterday, a woman this was her second time, 2 days before that, it was a woman's 4th time. So it's like, this is so great. Like it's catching on, it's happening. The third part, I don't know. I think the third one would be the freedom, really. There is a freedom, but then there is an obligation. So the freedom to work anywhere, right? Like if I decided to, because I live in Mexico, we love driving around and like going to different cities or whatever, or flying somewhere. And so the freedom to work from the beach.
I love that. Yeah.
But I'm up at 6 a.m. no matter where we are,
Sure.
And this morning it was 5. So it was like, that I love that. I really love that. And I see the more success 4 Naturals has, I can make my little dream come true. What is my new dream? You ask? Well, I want to be a farmer in Thailand.
What? For real?
I
love that.
I want to farm
Why Thailand, though? Okay. Right.
Yeah, because we just became legal, and I went back in 2018 for the month of December, and I loved Thailand. I loved it. So yeah, I would love my business to be in a space where I don't have to be on the North American continent, that I could be on a different continent and still like run my business, but also live a much simpler life.
Right. Why not the North American continent?
Well, I've been here the whole time. So for me, it's like, I want to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your vision for 4Naturals? What do you see it becoming?
I see 4Naturals becoming a very well recognized and appreciated staple in textured hair care. I see hair salons adopting the 4Naturals detangling method, and Black women and children having a better experience in salons, no matter who owns it. As long as they're carrying 4Naturals, they know that they're going to get a very consistent experience.
I love that. Perfect. I hope it comes through soon, that patent. Great. So the rapid fire. If you had to write a memoir, if you haven't already, what would it be called and why?
Don't fucking give up.
Yay. Love it.
Don't fucking give up. And really, I used to say this thing like really young. I was like, people would be like, hang in there, like, don't let go. I've had depressions in my life. And, I've struggled with, suicidal ideation since I'm like 8 years old. And one of the biggest lessons for me has always been like that extreme unhappiness, the end result of that, the losing the battle is taking action on those thoughts. Right. And so it's always been for me, like listening to why is life so unbearable for you? And then what I've taken away from those, big depressive episodes in my life have been like different ways in which I was not open to myself and not open to my own truth, living in a way that, I think other people want me to.
Right.
And not being open to the truth of Shalita. Right. Yeah. And so I think that for a lot of people, we're afraid of being alone. We're afraid of the loneliness. We're afraid of those thoughts. And I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot of value from being an attentive listener to myself, which is something that I never had as a kid. And I know a lot of people, even if they didn't have like my circumstance, you could have a ton of money and be neglected. Like it doesn't matter. Right. And so learning how to be that active, attentive listener to myself.
Right. Yeah.
So that is what my book would be. It would be all of those low points, all of those really learning points, those pit stops in my life. And don't fucking give up, because it really does get better. I literally went from sleeping in my dad's basement at 17 to the 25th or 6th floor of a dorm building in Manhattan with views of the Hudson River. One night. That happened.
Okay. Don't fucking give up.
Don't fucking give up.
Word.
Just don't fucking give up.
You're an actress, so I assume you'd play your own self very competently in your biopic. But if you had to choose someone else, who would it be to be the lead actress?
Oof, I'm so horrible. Because I couldn't even think of anybody. I don't know. These young actresses, I don't know their names. I don't know.
Okay.
So I know I'm outed.
All right. We'll let that one pass.
Thank you.
But if you had to host a dinner tonight with a famous Black woman in whatever industry, who would it be?
Ooh, dead or alive?
Dead or alive?
Okay, so dead, it would be Josephine Baker.
Ooh.
I've been obsessed with her since I'm 9 years old.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Stories, man.
She was mesmerizing too.
She was mesmerizing, but she was a full human. There were really dark periods for her.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I think that's it from me. Is there anything else that you think we should touch on as far as hair care for Black women goes, or, anything about your story that you're burning to let people know?
No, I think we covered it. I think it was really awesome. I'm glad that I got to come on here and talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for your generosity. I appreciate it. And that is all from me today. If you would like to connect with Shalita or hear more about her work, you can visit her website fornaturalshair.com. A link is included in the show notes together with her socials. I hope you've enjoyed the episode and that you will share it with others. Also, if you haven't already, please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so that others can find the show too. Thank you. I'm Kutlonis Kosana Richie, and until next time, please do take good care.